Hello, Puffins. We return to our regularly scheduled seating situation because this is kind of a rant. Maybe I should be in the corner for it, but it's also not a rant. It's a stream of consciousness about the general state of things. And I do mean that literally. I want to talk about our relationship to stuff. Physical things that live in our house, because I've been thinking a lot about this recently. And my husband and I have been talking about this for even longer. And I'm starting to notice, upticks in the discourse, if you will, about this from other quarters. I think we're in a moment of reconsidering our relationship to stuff. And I think that it's actually hitting the areas of life, media, discourse, comms, vibes, economics that I care about and that I talk about a lot here in this space. So I want to talk about it. I want to talk about our relationship to physical ownership of different kinds of media, because things are bad. Cards on the table, this is not a new topic for me. As I alluded to, Jeff and I talk about this a lot. It has informed significant purchases in our household, and I suspect it will start to inform future ones too, which maybe I'll get back to. Physical ownership of physical objects is kind of a weird thing when you think about it. I think that a lot of critics of people who think like me want to reduce the philosophy or the politics of ownership down to some very unhelpful shorthand. For instance, people will say, Cadence, you have left-leaning politics. That means that you don't believe you should own anything. We should all be, communally living. No, I don't actually think that, and neither do most left-leaning people. Sure, maybe there are people on the fringe, there are philosophies and movements that do think that, but that is not the majority of leftist thinking. The majority of leftist thinking is that private ownership is fine. The dispute is what should be privately owned versus what shouldn't be privately owned. There's a lot of things that I do think should be privately owned, and I think that private ownership is actually a really important functioning mechanism of society. Again, the debate is where you draw the line, not that the line shouldn't exist, right? And if you're wondering why I'm starting out with politics, it's because I do have a point, and I'm going to try and get back there in the end if I can loop all of this together. Oh God, please sit with me, guys. Sit with me. I promise I have a point. Also, setting the stage for why I'm thinking about this at the moment is because the Davos conference just happened, right? The World Economic Forum. Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney's speech is absolutely something for the rant corner, because in my opinion, it validated everything that I was talking about the vibe shift when it comes to politics and economics. But we know that I love to be right, so maybe I'll save that for another day. But the reason I bring it up is not for, self-gratification, but because it's easy to dismiss things like Davos as, a bunch of privileged people going off being privileged together, which it is. But don't forget that it's also a communications forum. Davos is an opportunity for a lot of very, very powerful people to collectively communicate what their priorities are and what they want them to be and how they intend to steer business trends, economies, and politics, right? I bring this up because there is a phrase that is trending in a lot of media right now, which ties back to the World Economic Forum of yesteryear. You might have seen this phrase wandering around. It's, "You will own nothing and be happy." You've seen this, right? Now, this phrase was published by the World Economic Forum, but it originated in a piece written by a Dutch politician. I'll link it here or in the description bits, what have you. It is a piece written by Auken. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation. And it comes from an essay, which is basically something like a thought experiment of how by the year 2030, her lived experience as a citizen and a consumer could look different. She was, and as far as I'm aware, is still very tech positive. She was not setting out a manifesto by saying this. She, again, was putting forward how certain ideas in tech, in politics, could be put into practice to structure society differently. Yes? She later had to clarify through retitling her essay from its original title to a later one and adding notes on that she wasn't arguing for her version of a utopia. She was trying to spark discussion about what shifts in technology could bring about and could mean. What Auken was essentially advocating for was a sharing economy. The idea that we needed less stuff overall and we needed to be able to share it more easily, whether that was renting it from providers or, again, collaboratively owning and using different resources within communities in order to have a better quality of life overall. She wrote that in, I believe, 2014 or 2016. I will confirm and post that around me. The World Economic Forum took those ideas in part and others and published their own essay and video in 2018. And that's where the phrase, "you'll own nothing and be happy," came from. I point all of this out because it's important to know where slogans come from. Yes? Like, you have to know the origin of your phrases. You have to know the devolution of them. You have to know where things actually originated if you want to argue with them or fully understand or articulate them. The phrase, "you will own nothing and be happy," did not stem originally from this piece. It stemmed from other thinkers who took a thought experiment and then tried to apply it in a forum where very, very powerful people steer the course of politics and the economy. Another caveat here, I am so virulently critical of conspiratorial thinking. I'm not implying here that people were moving in the shadows based on this. A lot of subsequent conspiratorial nonsense has sprung up around this phrase. I could do a whole rant about conspiracy theories and conspiratorial thinking. I've witnessed its destructive capabilities in my own life and with people who I know and love very dearly. I am highly, highly critical of default conspiratorial thinking. I do not believe that there is a secret cabal of rich people running the world. I don't need to. There is an actual group of very rich people running the world out in the open. And it frustrates me that people have to invent Illuminatis and shadow governments when, we have billionaires and government cabinets. Like, guys, you don't need to do this much work. I say that to say, think about what has happened since 2016 and subsequently 2018, when this slogan was kind of popularized and propagated by a conference of very wealthy business owners. What has happened when it comes to ownership of stuff? I would argue it's deteriorated. What do you actually own now versus what might have you owned 20 years ago? As a group, we're owning less and less stuff now, and we're renting more and more. That's by design. That's called rentier capitalism, where you don't own the things in your house or in your life. You pay someone for the privilege of access to it. Subscription models are not inherently bad. They serve a purpose, particularly when you are selling access to something that is very cost prohibitive to create, like print media used to be back in the day. That's where subscription models used to come from. If you wanted access to a certain publication, you did have to pay for it because that's how the production and distribution of that model worked. But as technology changes, so do the other mechanisms that surround it, right? And it's weird to me that we went from subscription-based media being the predominant popular kind of media, starting in the Victorian era, if not a little bit before, through to, like in my lifetime at least, an absolute flowering of free media or at least freely publicly accessible media, and suddenly everything has become paywalled again. I think some things should be paid for. Like if you value certain things, you need to support them monetarily. That's the system that we live in. But everything has been paywalled now. Cory Doctorow, in his book Enshittification, which I talked about in my last book report update, lays out in just kind of devastating detail how many things have become subscription models, particularly when they didn't start out this way. One example that he used that really stood out to me was, I don't remember the name of the brand, but like a baby crib or carrier of some kind, of a baby soother. Like it used to be that you would buy this thing to put your baby in, and you would also get access to some software associated with it that would track something about soothing your baby. I don't have kids. I don't know what all of the ins and outs. But what stood out to me and what stood out to Doctorow was the fact that when you originally bought this thing, all of that came inclusive. And since then, the company has changed its business model so that in addition to spending $1,000 on a piece of baby equipment, you also have to pay a monthly fee to access the software associated with it. And furthermore, you cannot then gift, transfer, or sell any of this on to another person, which is bonkers to me. Like, I remember growing up, like, if you were done having kids, it was normal and almost kind of expected that you would gift your baby things either to a family member or a friend or donate them somehow in the community to make the burden of childcare easier for someone else. Clothes, newborn stuff, whatever. Like, that was normal. But Doctorow uses this as an example of how the business involved doesn't want that to happen. They want, in a perfect world, every person to buy the $1,000 item and then be locked into the subscription model, which cannot be sold or gifted onward, i.e., the entire value of that object, the entire value of the product stays with the company. None of it transfers to the purchaser at any point, despite the price tag associated with it. Because ultimately, that's the value of owning something, right? The purchasing of an object gives you a degree of ownership of the value of that object. You can resell it on. You can gift it if you so choose. You can write it off on your taxes. Like, the value inherent in objects in our physical reality used to come with certain benefits of ownership. And almost everywhere in our lives, that's being stripped back and stripped away from us to retain the value, not to the purchaser, but to the owner. Wider economic conversations to be had about this, but I'm staying in my lane, and I want to talk about what this means in the world of media and how it's affecting me as a consumer, and how it's affecting the choices that I'm making. I exist in a weird place. I'm very critical of a lot of technology, but I also tend to be a somewhat early adopter of the technologies that I think are beneficial or useful to me. So back in the day, I was an early adopter of things like Apple Music. I was absolutely an early adopter of things like Kindle. I was an early adopter of things like streaming. And I don't actually think that any of that was bad in isolation, because when those products launched, they were fulfilling a need. Using Apple Music by way of example, it used to be that physically owning and storing your music cost you space. Yes, it cost you weight. It costs you volume in your household. And one of the benefits of something like Apple Music is instead of buying a record or a cassette or a CD, you could buy a line of code, a bunch of ones and zeros that gave you ownership over that piece of music that was highly portable and storable. That was the benefit. That was the trade that we were getting. We were sacrificing literal physical space and weight and volume in exchange for a degree of convenience. But we still had a degree of ownership over the file that we bought at the time. Yes, The same used to be true of ebooks. When you bought them, you had, access to them and you had a degree of ownership over them. But both of these business models have changed and shifted somewhat in recent years, most predominantly Kindle, which introduced an upgrade where you could no longer transfer the data associated with your purchase to another platform. You are locked into using Amazon products and Amazon platforms in order to access the written word that you have paid for. Doctorow argues, and I agree with him, that that's predatory because by making that change to deliberately prevent a person from moving away from a platform, that the business model has been to remove the option of choice from us, the consumers. Let's also talk about streaming now. Streaming serves some really, really useful functions, right? Again, you don't have to own the physical space to access the items that you want to access. I've referenced before how I'm a military brat, which meant that growing up every few years, quite literally, my family would be given a physical volume and weight limit of how much stuff we were allowed to move with us from one location to another. And every couple of years, every single person in my family, myself included, had to sit with our stuff and figure out what was necessary to our happiness and what was coming with us and what wasn't. I really admire and respect how much of our family's weight limit my parents dedicated to and committed to our books. That absolutely influenced me growing up. But that also meant that for someone like me, I have a complicated relationship to stuff. I have to really love something to want to own it physically. When Jeff and I moved to London from the States, nearly 15 years ago at this point, we literally moved here with 2 suitcases each. And because of how I was raised, that wasn't a hardship for me. It was an inconvenience, but I was like, okay, the things that I need, I can physically carry with me. But we did leave a lot of things in storage at my long-suffering and very lovely in-laws' house. And to this day, the things that they have maintained for us are almost entirely books and media. Before we moved to the UK, one of my individual projects was to make copies of all of our movies from DVDs to a hard drive so we could bring the hard drive with us. But I never for one moment considered throwing out the physical copies of those DVDs because streaming wasn't the thing that it was yet, and maintaining physical ownership of that media seemed important to me. I'm really glad I made that choice. Ditto books. I have about a dozen boxes worth of books stored in my in-laws' house that I need to at some point figure out how to ship over here when we someday hopefully own our own home, because I never want to get rid of those. I've talked about this before. It takes a lot for me to buy a book. I have to love it. I have to think it's important. I have library cards in 2 countries and, I get through books really quickly, but to physically purchase a copy, it has to be very, very meaningful or important to me. And I still have about a dozen boxes worth of books. And I set all of that out because if you've been following along with my videos for the last few months, you might have noticed the number of books on my shelves has gone up. I'm starting to buy more books. You cannot tell this, but that is a record player. Jeff and I bought that for ourselves for Christmas a couple of years ago. That was our present to ourselves. And we did that for a very specific reason. It's because not all of the music that we wanted to listen to was available to us on streaming. Is the fact that we got a vinyl player somewhat pretentious? Yes, and that's shout out to my husband. He's the music guy in our family. I love music. I enjoy it. I don't love it the way he loves it. I'm a words girl. My default is to listen to audiobooks or podcasts. If I'm listening to something, it's probably that. In the way that words are my medium, music is his medium. If I'm booking a date night or night out, we're going to the theater, we're going to a lecture, we're going to a museum, we're going to a play, we're going to a musical. If he's booking the night out, we're going to a live gig. So he's a music snob. But the purchase of that record player behind us is only partially due to snobbery. was also due to the fact that we were having conversations about not everything we want is available on streaming. And if it's not available on streaming now, it could also never be. And even if it does become available, it might be taken away at some point. And then, of course, we started doing, the logical thought experiment to really think this through on other platforms. People joke that the internet is forever. It's not really. Like, there's a lot of things that have been lost to time. Just go check out the Internet Archive. The internet can be long-standing, but it's not in and of itself permanent. It feels permanent, but it has physical boundaries too. And in the push for the convenience of not having to take up physical space and weight and volume, I've been reconsidering that of late. Music is just one of those spaces. Books are definitely another one of them. And with some of the business model changes that I referenced before, I don't currently have an Apple Music account. And I'm glad that I have a physical downloaded copy of all of the music that I did purchase back in the day through that medium before it got locked up, because I want to be able to access the things that I purchased with my own money and to use them in the appropriate ways that purchasing them used to be able to give me. That's a normal thing to want. I don't want to rent everything. Yes, there's some conveniences that come from renting certain kinds of things. There's absolutely other benefits that come from sharing things, but I don't want to rent what I used to be able to own. And that is changing my relationship to stuff again as I approach my 40s. The joke's been made about how we've disrupted cable so much that we've reinvented it. It used to be that you paid a fee and you got access to everything. And then, the business companies sequestered their own content and charged you individually to access it. And so someone's going to have to disrupt the disruption by reinventing cable someday. It's maddening. I don't want to have to pay 20 different fees in order to be able to access the things that I used to just have in my house. I kind of just want to have them in my house again, right? Thank God for libraries. And like I said, I have 2 different cards on 2 different continents. And I also have a Kindle Unlimited subscription because just of the sheer volume of books that I get through. But you know what? There are some books that I just want to own. There's a handful of books on my shelf, maybe I'll do some kind of feature showing of them someday, of my favorite novels that I reread at least once a year, if not more. And I don't want to have to pay to do that. I mean, I'm fine paying taxes for libraries because other people get to benefit from it too. But if I know I'm going to reread a book multiple times, I'd rather just have a physical copy of it in my house. And I'd also really like the fact that, do you know what physical books don't have in them? Ads. I am far from the first person to complain about this, but it used to be that when you signed up to a streaming service, one of the things that you were literally paying for was access to the content without being bombarded with ads all the time. And it is maddening to watch them walk that back and try to create new tiers where they have to raise the price for you. Well, they don't have to. They want to raise the price for you so that if you stay at the lower price, they can force ads on you. And this isn't just happening with things like media platforms. Have you seen the Samsung fridges that you can have in your house that are going to broadcast ads to your family all day long? What dystopian bullshit is this? Apparently, Tesla rolled out some kind of model, because Teslas are, computers with wheels, where the panel that is not optional in order to drive that car, you need it to be able to drive and manipulate and use your vehicle, also was displaying ads. And you know what? That was a health hazard to people within the car. No shit. We are sold to constantly, from your social media platforms to the fridge in your house, apparently. Absolutely everything is a platform now to sell you ads. And as Doctora points out, part of the push towards app-based platforms and subscription-based models where you have to access portals or apps in order to get the full benefits of your products is because the laws around those apps or those platforms are different, and they can be stuffed full of ads, which is how a lot of these businesses end up making their money. So again, you're not just paying for the product, you then have to pay for the subscription month to month, where you are sold more products, which may or may not even be related to the thing that you purchased in the first instance. This is what rentier capitalism looks like. You own less and less. You are literally renting the car you drive, the fridge in your house, the space on your own television. It's not yours to command or control anymore. Purchase no longer gives you choice. The biggest reason that Jeff and I are starting to move back towards physical media in the realm of music, in the realm of books, and, I'm going to confess something here, is because we want the benefits of choice that purchase and ownership used to provide. Owning media gives you the option to say no. Let me give you an example. Let me use my favorite punching bag again, Disney. Jeff and I canceled our Disney subscription, and we did it specifically because Disney chose to settle a lawsuit that we and other experts believe they would have won against the government, to kowtow to the government, to garner political favor with the government. And we thought, no, we don't need that. We don't need that in our lives. We canceled the subscription. But in doing so, I was kind of reminded that that Disney and its conglomerate has actually produced pieces of media that I really, really have enjoyed over the last decade or so. And if I simply paid the one-time purchase cost, if I had the ability to buy the Avengers on DVD, I wouldn't need to pay a monthly fee, which would end up costing me more than the actual purchase of a piece of physical media if I ever wanted to enjoy those movies again. That's the point, right? The point is to get us to pay more over time rather than a one-time purchase that keeps us free to make other choices when it comes to our time and our attention. Purchase and ownership in the original purest sense is supposed to give you a share of value that you can decide how you can and want to use. You can sell it on, you can retain it, you can choose to deploy it at will. That shouldn't be something that you have to rent, not from a government, not from a business. In a very real way, this is no different to me than the concept of health insurance in the United States, where you have to purchase a product, right? You have to purchase a plan, and then you have to continuously pay into that plan. And then you also have to pay the co-payments when you show up for an appointment. And then you probably still have to pay even more to get access to certain kinds of treatments or testing or what have you. So what did you even buy in the first place? Who even knows, right? This is rentier capitalism. This is the subscription model of everything, where you have to pay to play at every single stage. And even when you buy into the initial product or the initial offering, because it genuinely gives you the benefit of ease or more space in your house, even when it comes with material benefit to you, the goalposts will be moved on you so that you must end up paying more. If you don't own anything, you are inherently less free and less able to choose to act. So a big change in my approach to media in the foreseeable future is going to be prioritizing physical ownership again. I don't even own a DVD player right now, but I have started making a list of the movies and the TV shows that have come out in the last 15 years, since we moved to London, that I would want to own, that meet the bar of ownership for me, which I've already said is pretty high. And I'm going to keep an eye out for those things when I see them in the wild. I want to own a physical copy of them because, simply put, I simply don't trust that these streaming services, that all of them are going to continue to make it. They're in too much competition with one another to all extract profit from us in ways that I just don't feel is sustainable. We're not doing well as a consumer base. And it is fascinating to me how many people are willing to pay 15 different fees and think it makes them more free or more able to act than paying for one and getting all of those things that used to be bundled. Yes, I'm talking about taxes and healthcare. But also, simply put, I don't want to pay 15 companies for patchwork access to things. And until that problem is solved, I'm going to have to make different choices. Jeff and I simply don't have the budget to maintain that. And if I'm willing to leave, one platform due to, my principles, I realized I'm willing to leave more too. And I want the ability to make that choice without feeling the benefits in my life to permanently be diminished by them. Like, it's okay to want to own things, and it's okay to want to own media and art. Those are the things that make life worth living. It's not shallow to want access to popular media. Look at all of the joy and benefit that we, the audience, have had in the last couple of months, talking primarily about a single piece of media that has come into all of our lives and absolutely blown us all of the water. Yes, I'm once again talking about my gay hockey show. But yes, everything does in fact come back to heated rivalry. That is a piece of media that I want to own. And I want to own it for a few reasons. Number one, I don't trust that it will stay available to me, through streaming services. I just don't. Especially not when my nation is, increasingly at odds with the nation that created that media, right? When things like tariffs or changing relationships between digital structures and the internet might affect one country's ability to access media in another. We see this already in other areas of the world. It's foolish to think that it won't happen in mine or couldn't happen in mine. I don't trust that a bunch of the absolute freakish Christian nationalists at the helm of my government even want me to have access to queer media anymore, right? For any number of reasons, it's silly of me to expect to always have access to something in the current structures and models that I do. So yeah, when the Heated Rivalry soundtrack comes out on vinyl, I'll be buying it. And I am one of many people who have emailed the team at Crave to beg for physical media copies, because we don't actually live in a world of permanence right now. We live in a world of great instability and change. And I simply don't trust corporations who, are trying to extract more and more profit from people to allow me to access things that I've already paid for once or maybe even twice if it doesn't help their bottom line. So yeah. What's your relationship to stuff like right now, particularly media? Is it changing? Do you find yourself buying more books? Do you find yourself buying physical music? How are you thinking about streaming and physical media for things like TV and shows? Is any of this resonating with you? Or have I missed something? Because as always, I want to hear other perspectives and opinions on this. I just feel that if I'm right about so many aspects of the current business and economic systems, of the changing nature of content, the changing nature of accessibility, the fundamental flaws and impermanence that I believe rentier capitalism brings us to. I don't think you can make everything rental. I just don't. I don't think it's sustainable. I doubly don't think it's sustainable in a world where the exact same business mindset that is trying to make workers redundant from as many things as possible can also continue to demand that they consume as much as they do. Like, the math doesn't math, people. You know, about 10 years ago, the powers that be, you know, the powerful people, the business minds, the political minds of the World Economic Forum telegraphed where they wanted to steer things. They wanted to steer us towards a future, not as it was kind of initially envisioned by the person whose ideas they were borrowing, which was, again, more of a sharing economy. But they extracted enough of her thinking and ideas to twist it into something else, to a system where we would own nothing and be happy. Or so they said, because what they said and what their actions are were never in alignment. We own less than we've ever owned, and we're miserable. So in spite of the fact that times are hard right now, in spite of the fact that if you're like me, you budget, you live on a budget, in spite of the fact that I think we need to be making very, very deliberate choices about who we spend our money with and how, I'm probably going to be using my very, very limited amount of discretionary budget this year to invest once again in physical media. I want to be able to access the art and the work that is meaningful to me, that I find interesting, that makes me think. And I don't want to have to pay a toll in order to do so. I also want to retain my ability to choose. I want to be able to choose to walk away from providers or platforms or businesses or organizations that are doing more harm than good. Ownership of my little pockets and packets of their product gives me the ability to do that in a way that streaming and renting never will. I don't want a washing machine that, you know, I have to have an app to use. I definitely don't want a fridge that I have to pay a subscription service to use. I don't want a car that I have to rent twice over, not just to lease, but also to unlock various features that I used to be able to have with the turn of the key. We as a society are not more free if everything becomes pay to play. We're not. It's supremacist logic with extra steps. It is a logic that dictates that if you can't pay, you don't deserve, at the level that I'm thinking, you know, to access good art. And at the worst, you don't deserve to live. That is the way our society has trended. So all of which is to say that, you know, when I talk about culture change and shifts, when I talk about Mark Carney's speech, when I talk about shifting tech and media and economic landscapes, the things being said right now are going to be felt 10 years from now. And to prove it, you only have to look back to what was said about 10 years ago to connect it to many of the experiences that we're having. But if this moment is showing us anything, it's that individuals can still make really, really powerful choices. And most of the things that keep us from making it are simply inconvenience or FOMO. And that's not a good enough reason, in my opinion, to simply go along with things that are bad. For a long time now, I was willing to rent my access to media. And I enjoyed it and I benefited from it, you know, from books to music to TV videos. That's not good enough for me anymore. I'm going to be making choices about what I want to own again, what I do not want to cede to someone else to rent back to me. I highly encourage you to do the same. It might look different from you. You might not make the same choices as me. And in fact, if you don't, I'm really curious to know why and where you do or don't draw this line. I'm just curious to hear from other people about this because yes, there is an important role for private ownership, even in progressive points of view, politics, and living. And if I've drawn it in so many other places, it's been interesting for me to realize how much I've been willing to let slide in the areas of life that I actually consider the most important to me. Let me know, like, once again, kittens, this is a bit of a weird one. This was definitely a topic for the rant chair, but given the visuals I needed to have, I moved it back to my normal spot. But I want to know what your relationship is to stuff. Are you thinking about it differently right now? Why, if so? Like, have you noticed a change in yourself? Have you noticed a change politically or economically? Like, how do you think about the things in your home or the things that take up space? What have you gotten rid of and what might you be bringing back and why? I want to know, because from no-buy challenges in the beauty space, wider discourses on, the quality of construction of things like clothing going down, to the very real conversations that we all are having about politics and tech and media right now. It's all kind of one big thing to me. It's all facets of the same problem. And I want to stay in my lane and talk about the things that I talk about in this space while still acknowledging that I'm not just talking about this space. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like I said, I haven't worked out all of my thoughts about this, but I want to know what other people think and if your habits are changing too. Let me know.